This is arguably the most famous, debated, and controversial map from the European Age of Discovery, thanks to the Internet and a few well-known authors and researchers, most notably Charles Hapgood. In this video, I'll give you an overview of the Piri Reis map, highlight some of its most fascinating features, and talk about some of the interesting claims about ancient lost knowledge from the end of the last ice age, along with the mainstream view. But anyway, let's dive in. The Piri Reis map was created in 1513 by Piri Reis, an Ottoman admiral, navigator, and cartographer. Piri was his name, and Reis was a title, meaning captain or admiral. This map is a surviving fragment of a larger world map, with only the western third remaining. The rest has been lost. We'll start with this island. This island is Hispaniola, and it stands out more than any of the other islands Columbus came across in the Caribbean. It's shown with lots of detail, like mountains, towns, and even a parrot. The map labels it Isla de España, which means Spanish island. To us today, it looks like the island is drawn with the wrong orientation. But back then, Columbus thought he had found Japan. Piri Reis cites a lost map by Columbus as one of his sources. That mistake may have influenced how Piri Reis drew and shaped the island. But some believe this is not Hispaniola, but a larger landmass now under the sea, sometimes connected to Atlantis, and that this is Bimini Road. Bimini Road is an underwater formation near Bimini Island in the Bahamas, made up of large, flat limestone blocks that resemble a paved road or wall. Discovered in 1968, it has sparked theories about ancient civilizations, though most scientists consider it a natural geological formation. But most agree this is likely just meant to depict mountains on the island. To the Ottoman mapmakers, the Americas were just as mysterious and strange as the Far East seemed to European mapmakers. Along the coastline, they included made-up or exaggerated animals like llamas, monkeys, and pumas, and even weirder creatures, like a man whose face is on his chest. As for the land's interior, they didn't try to map it or speculate. Instead, it's filled with Turkish writing. Back then, mapmakers from the Ottoman Empire and Europe already knew a lot about Northwest Africa. The Portuguese started exploring it in the 1400s, and by that time, Islam was strong in areas like Mali, and it looks almost the same as the European maps made during that period. But the most controversial part of the Piri Reis map is the land shown at the very bottom. The text here states, "This country is a waste. Everything is in ruin, and it is said that large snakes are found here. For this reason, the Portuguese infidels did not land on these shores, and these are also said to be very hot." Some people believe it might actually be Antarctica, but shown during a period it wasn't covered in ice, thousands of years ago. If that's true, it would mean someone mapped the continent long before modern explorers even knew it existed. Some believe this was knowledge from a lost civilization, or even aliens. We'll get more into Piri Reis's sources in a minute. Adding to the theory that this information is from a lost ancient source, some argue the accurate placement of South America's coastlines, as longitude was notoriously difficult to measure accurately until centuries later, with the invention of accurate timekeeping devices. However, the vast majority of researchers argue the Antarctica match only appears if you rotate, resize, and distort the map's southern coastline. It's not an objective or consistent fit. Even when scientists use modern elevation data to digitally remove the ice from Antarctica, since the Piri Reis map implies that it's ice-free, given that it talks about it being warm and possesses snakes, the actual coastline still doesn't match the map's shape very well. Also, current scientific evidence shows that Antarctica has been continuously covered in ice for over 30 million years, even during interglacial periods, or natural warm phases, like we live in today. I'll have to agree that it's far more likely a distorted version of South America, or speculative geography, possibly conflated with the Greek Terra Australis theory, which I've made an entire series on. This was land that had not been discovered, but was part of a hypothesis that the southern hemisphere needed as much land as the north to keep the world balanced. The text about large snakes is likely referring to anacondas or boa constrictors, which are native to Brazil and parts of Argentina. The part about a very hot waste and in ruins suggests that they were describing the dense and unfamiliar jungle terrain. One possible explanation for the accurate depiction of the South American coastline is that the Portuguese had already made repeated contact with the region, and possibly even reached it before Columbus reached the Americas. Although precise tools for measuring longitude didn't exist at the time, experienced navigators could gradually improve their charts through repeated voyages by observing coastlines, ocean currents, and landmarks. Piri Reis likely had access to Portuguese maps or maritime knowledge that reflected these multiple voyages. While still a theory, the fact that the 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas conveniently placed Brazil within Portuguese sphere of influence has led some to suspect that the Portuguese already knew the land was there. Piri Reis mentions 20 or more sources for his information, including a map by Columbus, maps from the Portuguese, and an Arabic map of India. But the text about his sources causing the most interest is, these lands are based on maps drawn from the time of Alexander the Great, which are admired for their accuracy. Some paraphrase and use the word ancient instead of Alexander the Great. The mainstream belief is he was referring to Ptolemy, a 2nd century CE Greco-Roman geographer whose work shaped medieval and Renaissance cartography. Ptolemy drew heavily from earlier sources, like Eratosthenes, the 3rd century BC head of the Library of Alexandria, famous for calculating the Earth's circumference. Eratosthenes likely based much of his geographic knowledge on information gathered during and after Alexander the Great's military campaigns. Piri Reis may have referred to some of his sources as originating from ancient times for several strategic and intellectual reasons. First, it enhanced the credibility of his map by linking it to long-respected traditions of geographic knowledge, using sources such as Ptolemy. Second, referencing ancient origins may have added a sense of historical depth and prestige, as it does today. It also served to undermine European claims of original discovery by implying that these lands were already known to earlier cultures. In doing so, Piri Reis elevated Ottoman and non-European knowledge traditions, suggesting that the so-called New World may not have been entirely new after all. In the Quran, there is a figure that is said to have traveled to the farthest reaches of the earth, and in Turkish and broader Islamic literary tradition, he is often identified as Alexander the Great. Though he cites the Portuguese and Columbus as sources for the Americas, it appears Piri Reis believed the Europeans had gained their knowledge from sources dating back to the age of Alexander the Great. One inscription on the map mentions that a book fell into the hands of Columbus. In his 1526 atlas, Piri Reis goes further, explicitly crediting European discoveries to lost works originating from legendary voyages during the time of Alexander the Great. So you could say this map has long been at the center of an alternative history. Early theories linked it to ancient sources like Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, while modern versions connect it to a lost advanced civilization that supposedly existed as far back as 10,000 to 12,000 BCE, long before any known ancient societies. While I think the modern theory is a bit of a stretch, it's nice to see these old maps getting so much attention, and at this point, the new theory itself has become part of this map's fascinating history. Hopefully, the renewed interest has brought more people and more knowledge to the fascinating world of old maps, a topic many never even knew existed. And that's all for this video. If this topic was interesting to you, I have tons of other old map videos, many of which are also at the center of alternative history theories. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.